certain unalienable rights. Among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its power in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Those words were penned by Thomas Jefferson in 1776, recognizing a grander truth than what I think any of them really realized was going on at the time. While deciding and researching today, I came across a quote from Mikhail Gorbachev, of all people, who said that war is a failure of politics. War is a failure of politics. And he actually lived that because he pulled out of a lot of things while he was in charge. But to know that, the words of the day did not hold, and that's what led to the Revolutionary War, that the politics did not take care of things, that it was not, everybody did not see things the right way. And even Thomas Jefferson, in his own journals and in his own book, there is one book that can be really attributed to him other than his journals, called The Notes on State of Virginia. And he talks about how there are unjust things that he recognizes are going on at that time. Things like slavery, although he also admits that he's kind of a bigoted person. He admits that fully, and he says that's part of my upbringing and I try very hard to overcome it. So this realization that we overcome some of what we learn as we grow up was in him, and he expressed that. He comments on lots of views, and including the separation of church and state. He's really one of the first outspoken ones that said, you know what, I don't care what my neighbor calls God. It doesn't matter to me. That's not what we should be arguing about. And he was instrumental in getting some of that verbiage out, especially in Virginia at the time, to allow people to express the way that was right for them. He was also very educated, lots of books. In fact, his personal collection was the start of the Library of Congress. So, and his personal collection at the time that the Library of Congress was started was over 3,000 books. And then he had even more by the time he passed, because he said he couldn't live without books. So he refurnished himself with all of those. I just want to point out that he is a divisive person. He really is. And yet he admitted that a lot, that he was a divisive person. He understood that. He understood that there was these principles out there that we were striving for that weren't quite realized, not even in himself, even though he knew that that was where it needed to be. Abraham Lincoln also recognized how divisive Jefferson was. He said, all honor to Jefferson. These are Lincoln's words. To the man who, in the concrete pressure of a struggle for national independence by a single people, had the coolness, forecast, and capacity to introduce into a merely revolutionary document an abstract truth, and so embalm it there that today and in all coming days it shall be a rebuke and a stumbling block to the very harbingers and reappearing tyranny and oppression. Abraham Lincoln is saying, you know what, this is so great, and it's going to be something we stumble over for a very long time in order to realize this greater truth. and that we all have this recognition of greater truth in us, and that it was able to be put down in such a document that people in this country celebrate every year is huge, And we consider, I consider, there is a theory that a lot of these first documents of the United States are living documents. Meaning, and I put the definition of a living document on your papers. It's a big discussion in itself, but in a nutshell, it is the claim that the United States Constitution and other documents hold dynamic meaning that evolves and adapts to new circumstances, even if the document is not formally amended. That these documents hold truths that need to yet be realized, and they are living, breathing opportunities, right? And we are the living, breathing opportunities of divine, looking at that truth, going, that's something to strive for and to know that we can make it. You know, even though things sometimes seem like a big wreck and a half, there is this document from our beginnings that say, you know what, we can get to a place where we recognize that a gift of Creator says that all men are created equal. And this has been butted against right from the beginning. So if you read Abigail Adams, who was the wife of John Adams, who's also a framer and one of the first presidents, she, because people wrote back and forth and had journals at the time, we know that Abigail was on John's case from the beginning, saying, you said men, what about us women? What about the women? And he basically said, you know, hold your skirt, woman, one thing at a time. That was basically the answer. And yet there was a recognition that there was an ideal there to live up to. Now, my one son who's just recently studied some of this in school, he's like, Mom, it took like 100 years for that to happen. She had to hold her skirt a long time. Yeah, but it happened. It happened. You know, the idea that there's a one people. Also, it seems that documentaries are a thing this summer, my children and myself. And in the last couple of weeks, we've watched two that were instrumental in this idea that we are one peoples. One is called Women in Motion. And it's about Nichelle Nichols, who played Uhura in Star Trek, working with NASA and a campaign to get both women and people of color to even apply for the shuttle program. And because what they found was, even though there were a lot of qualified people, a lot of qualified women and people of color that could apply, they weren't, because they didn't feel like they even mattered. That the disenfranchisement and the idea that all men are created equal didn't count for them was so prevalent that they didn't even try. So she worked with NASA, and she worked, it was just amazing, her company called Women in Motion, and what she was able to do in terms of the amount of people that even applied. And then when you look at the picture of the original shuttle astronauts, it really does look like the United States, much more than any other picture that had happened up until then. Women, people of color, lots of different backgrounds. Is great what she was able to accomplish. And then the other documentary that we watched was John Lewis's Good Trouble. And both of these are streaming if you're interested. And the idea that, this is paraphrased because I forgot to write down his exact quote, but that voting is that one non-violent tool that allows each voice to be heard, the most powerful nonviolent tool. So we know that most of his life was to make sure that people were not only registered, but got out and vote. And one statistic, again, this might be a little off because I didn't write it down, but in Mississippi, it went from 3% of the people of color being even registered to 73% after he and his group went on the campaign to get people registered. Because again, the idea was, well, sure, all men are created equal, but that doesn't count for me right now. And to change even the viewpoint of the people that it affected the most sometimes was difficult. And it was difficult because, and this is, I'm going to read Frederick Douglass. I love him. He said on July 4th, 1852, the existence of slavery in this country brands your republicanism as a sham, your humanity as a, watch me get it wrong. Your humanity is, and your Christianity is a lie. Because we still, at that time, there was slavery in the country. So all men are created equal is not being realized. So why are we celebrating, he said. So after emancipation, the Blacks that were freed started to celebrate Independence Day in great numbers. There was great joy. So much so that white mobs started attacking them. Again, this idea that no, we're not all celebrating. This is not all men created equal. And it took until people like Martin Luther King and John Lewis to start switching that. There were actually laws put in place that Black people were not allowed to celebrate 4th of July in the South. There were actually laws put into place, which seems crazy to us today, right? And yet that's what was happening. This ideal set forth by Thomas Jefferson saying all men, everybody, made from Creator, gets to do this thing, gets to celebrate. It took a long time, and we're still realizing that today. There are still disenfranchised groups. There's still things going on, and yet to recognize that there is a spirit of truth, that we are all children, that this is a living constitution, that we are in that divine mind and that point of God. I'm going to read from Ernest Holmes in The Science of Mind, as I put it on your paper also. It says, I am the center in the divine mind, a point of God, conscious life, truth, and action. My affairs are divinely guided and guarded into right action, into correct results. Everything I do, say, or think is stimulated by the truth. There is power in this word I speak because it is of the truth and it is the truth. There is perfect and continuous right action in my life and in my affairs. All belief in wrong action is dispelled and made negative. Right action alone has power, and right action is power, and power is God, the living Spirit Almighty. This Spirit animates everything that I do, say, or think. Ideas come to me, and these ideas are the divine ideas. They direct me and sustain me without effort. I am continuously directed. I am compelled to do the right thing at the right time, to say the right word at the right time, to follow the right course at all times. All suggestion of age, poverty, limitation, or unhappiness is uprooted from my mind and cannot gain entrance to my thought. I am happy, well, and filled with perfect life. I live in the spirit of truth, and I am conscious of the spirit of truth that lives in me. My word is the law unto its own manifestation, and I will bring to me or cause me to be brought to its fulfillment. There is no belief, no doubt, no uncertainty. I know that I know that I know. Let every thought of doubt vanish from my mind, that I may know the truth, and the truth may make me free. We know the truth, and it's up to us to actually act on the truth. I think that's more than anything what this day is recognizing that we have this wonderful document that says in creation, all men are created equal. Everybody gets to have a part in that. So how do we further that ideal? Maybe it's a lofty ideal, but how do we further that actual truth? We know that. We talk about that every week here. Every single week we say that. And there's such a separation, I think, and Carol knows this, I've talked to her about this, the struggle between what does really the separation between church and state mean? Does that mean we don't get involved at all in furthering that all men are created equal for each other, right? When it has to do with some kind of government thing. And yet, also in the Declaration, it says that the government is the servant, right? The government is the servant and not the master of the people. So in order for that truth to be realized, it is necessary for us to act in that moral fashion. And when I took the kids to downtown a few days ago to express the need for equal voting for everybody, there were a couple of people that I did not know about that have faith-based initiatives to talk about the morality of the issues. So it's not a party thing or this party thing or a talk about this person, we don't like them thing. It's a what is going on with the issue morally, and how can we adjust our behavior and our actions to show positiveness for everybody from the moral standpoint of these issues. And that's where it is. That's where it is. And that's what we can do, is through our actions in whatever way we are feeling led through that truth, right? Because it has to be inside of us. Live that living document, that truth, that moral imperative that goes beyond any kind of partisan politics. Because when the Declaration was written, there weren't any parties. When the Declaration was written, the United States did not have any parties. There was a recognition of moving forward together with, with an ideal that we are still working for, but an ideal that's the truth under all creation nonetheless. We can get there. Thank you.